when it comes to returning kicks. And honestly, there's a couple really good ones that I wouldn't be opposed to at all here.
Yeah, they had a lot of guys out there returning kicks, like you just said the other day. And I think the one that everyone's kind of been, gleaning on is Nick Harbor.
Yep.
And, I've had this discussion a few times now, and I think it's interesting because it's like, obviously, he's got the great speed, best speed on the team, and he's a very, big guy. I mean, he's 6'5",
right.
Just 200-something pounds. He's going to be tough to take down. So, in that sense, it would be good to use him on a kick return. Like, do you get a hole? He's gone. But again, the argument I've made is it's a great idea, and he's going to be able to break a lot of tackles, but the other 10 guys on the field need to do their part and block in front of him. Otherwise, it's like, if he's got 3 guys coming at him at the 15-yard line, it's like, I mean, I'd probably give like a 10 to 15% chance he breaks out of 3 tackles at one time. But
sure.
But it's like, if he's got some blocks in front of him, he is good enough to make the regular play turn into something bigger.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where it becomes really interesting. But you also have a lot of other options. And again, you don't want to get anyone hurt. So, but you really shouldn't be opposed to using some of your starters out there.
And that's a really good point that you bring up, because I feel like if you feel confident enough in your blocking, you can go with a guy like Harbor, who, again, the straight line speed is obviously there. And if he breaks into an open hole, he's gone. You got a really good chance for a kickoff return, going all the way possibly. But if you're a little concerned about the blocking, you probably want to go with somebody a little more elusive and shifty, maybe with one of these running backs. I'm just looking here. Rocket Sanders was back there, DJ Braswell, Oscar Attaway, a lot of different options there that can be a little more side to side and maybe be able to break those tackles a little bit easier. So, and again, that's something that's going to play out over the course of the month, and I'm sure they're shifting guys around in terms of who's going to be blocking and all that kind of stuff. But it really does kind of boil down to, like you said, the blocking up front and what kind of guy you have back there. Because again, Harbor can run as fast as anybody, faster than anybody probably. But if you want somebody to break tackles, maybe you go with somebody a little bit more small and shiftier.
Yeah, I think a few names that I would keep an eye on maybe for this role, and this is just who I would probably lean towards being the kick returners, because there's probably going to be 2 of them. I would say Mazio Bennett is a name to probably keep an eye on. And then, I think just younger guys in general, maybe guys that don't play as frequently, are the go-to options here, because they, like you said, shifty, smaller, have speed, maybe don't play a ton. Maybe a guy like Elijah Caldwell. We haven't really seen much of him. Obviously, he was a guy who committed to South Carolina going into last year from Northwestern. So a lot of guys will come from Rock Hill and stuff, but obviously he didn't play it all last year, and he's going to be a redshirt this year. So I think maybe I don't know if he's really going to crack the receiver rotation, but if you want to use him in some way, maybe kick returning is the way to go. But then again, you have a lot of other options. The ones I wouldn't personally use, Rocket Sanders, I just feel like that's too soon. If you're in a situation later in the year where he's been healthy all year and you really need something to go right here and you haven't been great on special teams, then sure. But like week 1, absolutely not. Like that's way like he's already probably going to be on a pitch count, right?
Sure. I feel like it's one of those things that you use kind of situationally, and from a body type standpoint, these guys kind of similar. At Georgia, Todd Gurley used to return kicks occasionally. Not all the time, but occasionally. And when he did it, it was a big deal, and he usually made a pretty big impact. So that could be something that Rocket Sanders kind of works his way into, where it's not every single time, but depending on what's going on, if you think there's an opportunity, depending on what you've seen maybe earlier in the game from this team and the way they were, tackling or whatever, then maybe you put them in for 1 or 2 kickoffs a game and maybe bust something open there. But I think it's an option you keep on the table.
Yeah, and I think once we kind of get into, media availabilities this week, and hopefully we'll hear from Rocket this week. I'm not sure who's speaking yet, but I think that would be something interesting to hear is like, hey, we've seen you in kickoff return situations. Is that something we're going to be seeing regularly, or, do they have you on like a pitch count or whatever? I lean towards, pitch count. But again, like you said, if it does come down to it and you need a big play from a big player, I think that's your guy right there.
And similarly with punt returning, you have a couple different names mixed in here. Jelon Kilgore did a lot of it last season, so I imagine he's probably going to be in the lead when it comes to doing that. But, Vakari Swain, Jared Brown, Larvadain, David Busey even got some returns there. A couple different options on the table, but I think you may end up kind of staying status quo with Kilgore there.
Yeah, I think you stick with kind of what you've been rolling with last year. If it worked last year, why not try it again this year? Jalen is a very solid player and has done it for a year now, and I think you keep rolling with it, and then maybe as a backup option. I don't know. I mean, we did see Jared Brown up there returning punts and stuff, and the other names like you said, but I feel like probably Kilgore is probably your best option right now.
The biggest thing, and again, we haven't paid a lot of attention to it this offseason, but it is vitally important, is the battle at place kicker. Mitch Jeter was somebody, last year was a little off, but the year prior did miss a single field goal, and that's something that is so underappreciated until you don't have it anymore. Now that he's off at Notre Dame, if we go out this season and we're missing kicks left and right, it's like, oh my God, we really miss Mitch Jeter. But you hope that whoever's stepping up in that role to replace him is going to be just as viable. And it looks like it's going to come down to Alex Herrera and William Joyce. My problem with that is both these guys have been on the roster for a while. Neither one of them has made an important kick. I know Herrera's had a couple of extra points, but he's never made like a meaningful field goal in a game. As a sixth-year senior in college, can he handle the pressure?
Yeah, and Alex Herrera is an interesting story because obviously, like you said, he really hasn't kicked a ton in big game situations for South Carolina just because Mitch Jeter has been here and before him Parker White and stuff. But, he's a guy that, got on scholarship last year, and that was a feel-good story and all that. And now he's got an opportunity to go out here and win this battle. Obviously, you've got Mason Love as well, but I feel like that's more in the waiting. And I was talking to him at Media Day the other day, and he was kind of telling me that they're going to have him working at punter, kickoffs, and holder on kicks and all that. So I don't expect him to be, kicking field goals at all this year. Maybe that's something in the future once both these guys are on their way because he's only a freshman.
Yeah,
so.
He's in position to succeed Kai Kroger when he eventually moves on.
Exactly.
Which that's going to be tough to replace for sure. Hopefully he has a good arm on him.
Yeah.
But the kicking job again, when you had a kicker that was as solid as Jeter was for the most part, you just kind of like, all right, it almost seemed kind of automatic at times. And again, last year wasn't perfect by any means for special teams across the board. But when you go into a season like this, not knowing what you have in these two guys from an actual in-game standpoint, I'm sure they're killing it in practice and they can make 45, 50 and all that kind of stuff. But what can you do when there's 80,000 people and a game on the line is a whole different story.
Yeah, and I mean, again, it's just like everything this season. We're going to learn a lot about this team in the first month of the year when they get, it's Kentucky right out of the gate after Old Dominion, and it's tough games this first stretch of the year,
right?
And a lot of battles that we're seeing right now. I mean, look, whatever the roster looks like and the starters on week one might change. It probably will change by the end of the year. So I just think, at kicker, it's a very important battle that we don't talk about enough. And again, it's going to be tough to replace the guys of the past, but I definitely feel that, I would probably lean towards Alex Herrera right now because he's got some of that in-game experience. But again, it's all going to be determined in this month.
We'll certainly see what happens. Want to remind you, we are now in week number 2 of the greatest moments in Gamecock sports history since the year 2000. We ran all of our Twitter polls last week. We have taken all those winners, created a new poll that is up now on 1075 The Game's Twitter page. Go and vote. It's going to be run for the next couple days, and we will crown the ultimate winner and talk about them at length next Monday, August the 12th. It's all sponsored by our friends over at Columbia Craft at 520 Green Street down in the Vista. Again, the greatest Gamecock sports moments since the year 2000 on 1075 The Game's Twitter page all week long. We will come back. We will dive into the wide receiver room a little bit. Mike Ferry, speaking to the media the other day at the open media availability, said some very interesting things about how this receiver room is going to shake out. But that next, it is the Extra Point. He is Jack Veltri from Gamecock Central. I'm Tyler Head on your Monday here on The Game. Don't know if you've been paying attention to the weather lately, but there's a little bit of a tropical storm coming up the coast. It'll be Hurricane Debbie. And with that, it's going to bring plenty of rain into the Columbia area over the next couple days. And if you have an open crawl space under your home, that can lead to some serious issues, including things like standing water. High humidity and condensation in that crawl space creates an environment for mold, mildew, and pests, including things like termites. That moisture can also lead to things like wood rot and floor joist problems as well. There's going to be some awful odors and smells from the mold and mildew in that crawl space that can cause some health issues for you and your family as well, like runny nose, itchy eyes, and coughs, because half the air that you breathe in your home comes from that crawl space. So you need to check out our friends at Canty Foundation Specialists after the storm. Make sure your crawl space is in good order so you and your family can live comfortably. Go online to schedule an appointment today at cantyconvicts.com. Again, go online to cantyconvicts.com for our friends at Canty Foundation Specialist. Oh, welcome back in. Extra point. Tyler Head, Jack Veltri from Gamecock Central along with you on your Monday here on the game. Working our way through what we've learned so far from the brief bit of camp that media has been able to view, mainly through special teams, but also going back to last week where the coaches got to speak to the media players and all that kind of stuff, had their big open media session at the indoor facility as they do each and every year. And one that we didn't get a lot from when we were talking on Friday was Coach Furry, who is coming in, obviously, as his first time wide receiver coach here at South Carolina after we spun the roulette wheel a couple different times in the offseason, figuring out who the wide receiver coach was going to be. But he comes in here, the players seem to like him a lot. The recruits that have obviously committed to the Gamecocks in the offseason seem to be very high on him. I think when I look at a position coach, if you have NFL experience, especially with the experience that he has, I feel like that can take you to a different level with these guys, especially the ones that you're trying to recruit, because everybody wants to go to the NFL. Everybody wants to come in here, play in college for a couple of years, and have the opportunity to go to the next level. And when you have a guy that can sit there in your living room and tell you, I've been there and I've done that before, or sit down with you in meetings and practice and stuff like that, I think that takes that relationship to a different level, because, again, he knows literally what it takes to get you to that level.
And it's not like he's just a guy that, made it to the NFL and never saw any playing time. This is a guy that
led the NFC in receptions in 06.
Yeah, and this is a guy, like you just said, this is a guy that has made an impact in the NFL on a roster for a few years. So, again, it's not like he's a scrub or anything. So he knows what he's talking about, for one. So that in itself is good. But, again, like you said, having NFL experience is something that this coaching staff really does have now. I mean, you got, Dal Loggins obviously comes from an NFL background. Mike Shula has coached the NFL, and Mike Furry, and guys like that have really seen what it's like coaching in the NFL. And I feel like that kind of helps set these guys up very well with, having the pro style offense for one, but also just preparing them for, what life's like. I'm sure there's a lot of questions from these college kids about, hey, what do you got? What do you like? Bring up certain situations as to what to expect when it comes to, potentially playing in the NFL and all that. And so it's a different ball game, but they help you get ready for it. And with Mike Furry in this receivers room, I feel like his energy is a really nice breath of fresh air and could really help him this year.
Well, and he's getting kind of a clean slate to work with, because this is a completely revamped room from a year ago. You have the guys that were in there last year in Harbor and Russell, but they weren't key contributors like your Juice Wells, or for the start of the year at least, Juice Wells and Xavier Legette and Amirian Brown and guys like that. So you kind of get a new piece of clay to mold into whatever you want this wide receiver room to be. We'll start off with cut number 11 here. This is Coach Furry talking on Thursday about figuring out who's going to play where in this wide receiver room.
Obviously, a lot of it has to do with schematics, and so obviously we're not going to get into schematics. But I think the best thing is nowadays is put your best three wideouts on the field, right? And I think that's the healthiest thing to do. And there's a lot of intangibles that have to that correlate into becoming the best three wideouts in the room. But and that's our job over the next 3 weeks to get that going and get it ready. But that's what I think. I think you don't just place a guy here and there just because that's what I think. You put the best three guys out there that can play football, and it's our job to work to their traits and move them around and do whatever we need to do to make sure we showcase their abilities.
I think we all kind of get married to the idea of size when it comes talking about wide receivers, and almost in a way typecasting them based on what their height is. Because, okay, anybody that's under 6 foot, well, that's automatically got to be a slot guy. It's not necessarily the case. More often than not, yes, you're going to line up a taller guy at your X spot, but you can move guys around and come up with 2 different combinations. I actually draw a pretty interesting comparison to your favorite NFL team from a couple seasons ago, where you had a wide receiver core that was, for the most part, pretty small outside of Gabe Davis in the Buffalo Bills. You had Stephon Diggs, Cole Beasley, John Brown, these shorter guys, Isaiah McKenzie, that they utilized in a lot of different ways. Very effective offense, by the way, but it wasn't the traditional norm of what you think of.
Yeah, and I know Mike liked this, Mike Uva from Gamecock Central, Julian Edelman and Danny Amendola, guys like that have, those are guys that have made significant impacts and won Super Bowls in the NFL, and then maybe another guy like Cooper Kupp, who, so I guess the point is that, size isn't everything. I think you can be a great big tall receiver and stuff like a Nick Harbor, for instance, but
Sure.
you also have to have the fundamentals of pass catching and route running and all that. And we saw Nick last year. He had his moments, but again, he also didn't make a tremendous impact. So we're going to see how that translates over this year. And then, obviously they've got a lot of smaller guys. Mazio Bennett's kind of smaller, Tyshawn Russell, AHB, guys like that. But again, it's like if they're quick and fast and can make an impact, like I would take that any day. If they got all the right tools, like I don't care what size they are, they'll be fine.
Size helps when it comes to like getting contested balls, high points, stuff like that. Being able to literally just out jump the DB on you and have those extra couple of inches to your advantage. That does play a factor, and we saw that come into effect a couple times last year as well. Which again is what made a guy like Xavier Legette so great. And we saw some of those hints with Nick Harbor as well. So that is one area where size does play into a factor, but that's not what every single catch is going to be. So again, you can move these guys in a variety of different ways, and I'd be very interested to see how this relationship with Mike Furry and Dow Loggins end up working out, with what kind of different combinations they can go through. And I imagine, again, you got a little glimpse of that in the spring practice with a lot of these guys, but guys like Devon Campbell, guys like Vendrivius Jacobs, they weren't on campus then. So what do they do coming in? As well as Nick Harbor, who wasn't on camp, who wasn't a part of practices back in the spring. How much does adding those guys into the mix change what you're doing in terms of your different combinations of receivers?
And I think those guys are only going to add to what this receiver room can look like. Because again, like you said, it's totally revamped. It's much different from last year. No Wells, no Legette. I mean, no Brown. You really have to replace your top three guys. And, I don't know what it's going to look like. I think it's going to be very, I think it's going to be very by committee, probably for right now. But again, I think once you get to the scrimmages, like they have a scrimmage this weekend, and I think they'll have another one at some point. And then week 1 against Old Dominion. Those are like your 3 test runs to kind of figure out, okay, who are going to be your guys that are going to be out there being ball hawks, making big plays and stuff, and doing the right things. And I think by the end of it, I would imagine, I think they're going to come out of this with like 5 or 6 guys that can be like your go-to targets. But I think that's really going to help them since they definitely have a lot of depth. It just needs to be good depth that can turn into game situations and stuff.
Well, one of those guys that everybody's anticipating to be in that group of one of the key guys featured in this receiver room is, of course, Nick Harbor. And I thought this was a very interesting comment from Coach Furry. Cut number 9 here, Dave. This is Coach Furry talking about what needs to be unlocked with Nick Harbor and his skill set going into this season.
Yeah, I don't know if it's unlocked. I think when you look at any of the guys, I think it's developed, right? I think it's just guys learning how to play the game, being comfortable with what we're asking them to do, becoming more confident in what we're asking them to do, become more consistent in what we're asking them to do. And I think that's all part of growth. I don't think that's people being locked into things they can't and can't do, or can and can't do. I just think when you look at him and some of the other guys in the room, they got to play ball, right? They got to play ball, and I think these next 3 weeks are going to be really neat for him and for a lot of the guys, just to see how they develop, see how they pick stuff up. You don't play as fast as you can when you're thinking about a lot of stuff, and we all know he can run. We know there's a lot of guys in our room that can absolutely run, but you'll be at your fastest when you know what you're doing. And I think getting to that point is part of that development, and I think that's what I'm excited about, to see these guys get to that point.
And it's that part at the end there because, again, nobody doubts Nick Harbor's skill set. Nobody doubts Nick Harbor's athleticism. It's making it second nature where you're not thinking about it because, again, this was not his position in high school. He comes into college as an athlete, learning a position that it was a little bit more foreign to him when he was in high school. So there's a lot that goes into that. And again, we want him to be able to go out there and show that full athleticism without having to think about, okay, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, running this route, running that route, just making it second nature. We can go out there and be the monster they all hope he can be.
And I think last year was a big adjustment for him. Obviously he had his moments, like I just said before, last year, and he had some great catches, but again, it wasn't the full package. Like, we really didn't get to see a ton of big explosive plays from him. It was a lot of short yardage type catches and stuff, and I think this year I would imagine with the work he's put in and the fact that he's now in his sophomore year, he's got a lot more experience. I feel like he can maybe start to like put the pieces together. Maybe not the full thing, and I hope he does. I mean, it'd be great to see. But again, he's got at least 2 years of college left, and I think with him, it's just we know he's really tall, big, strong, and fast. How's the pass catching going to look? We know he's been taking 1,000 reps catching passes from jugs machines this summer. Is it going to translate over? We'll see what happens. But again, if he is every bit of what people expect and hope him to be, it can really, like, the potential for him is totally untapped, and we don't know how high the ceiling can be for him.
Well, the entire eyes of the nation are going to be upon him with his growing fame from the video game and everything. We certainly hope he can live up to that potential this upcoming season. Reminder, the Ultimate Season Ticket Giveaway is back. Go online to 1075thegame.com and click on the Ultimate Season Ticket 2.0 for your opportunity to win tickets to every home football, baseball, and men and women's basketball games for the upcoming 2024-2025 sports calendar. And just like last year, we're going to take our 3 finalists out to our summer golf event at Charwood Golf Club coming up at the end of the month and crown one true winner there. It's all sponsored by our friends over at the Men's Clinic at the Irmo Professional Center. We've got our eyes on the Olympics right now on NBC and USA. We'll talk a little bit of Olympic basketball, as it was another great weekend for the U.S. on the men's and women's front. That's coming up. It is the Extra Point on your Monday. Tyler Head and Jack Veltri from Gamecock Central here on The Game. Welcome back in. Extra Point. Tyler Head, Jack Veltri from Gamecock Central along with you on this Monday. It is time. Talk some hardwood brought to you by our friends over at Georgia Pacific as we turn our attention to what's going on in Paris as we were watching, I believe, clay shooting and Olympic high diving right now. I didn't know clay shooting was part of the Olympics, to be honest with you. I feel like I'm surprised by a couple sports every single year, that being the newest one.
Yeah, it's been a pretty good Olympics. You know, I actually watched a little over the weekend. Saw Katie Ledecky absolutely kill it in the 800-meter swimming and diving. It was unbelievable. And then there was a girl. I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but she finished. I think it was in the 800-meter. Finished maybe like top 3 or whatever from the U.S. She gets disqualified. Oh, no, it wasn't in the 800. It was in like the 400. She gets disqualified for a certain movement. Like as she, touches the, I don't know what the technical term is, but she's going off the wall and then, stroking back over. There's a certain move she did that was technically not allowed, like illegal. And she got DQ'd for it. So you hate to see it. And I think it was third place for her, so it went to an Aussie instead. So
I was going to say, imagine working for years and years only to get disqualified at the Olympics. Yes. That's got to be
and it's
crushing.
And it's not like intentional or anything.
No,
it was
of course
just
not.
It was just a move that they caught on camera, and it just happened. But other than that, I mean, the main sports that I know we're going to talk about here are basketball, and it's very good right now on both the men's and women's sides when it comes to the United States.
Absolutely. The U.S. men wrapping up pool play on Saturday, defeating Puerto Rico 104-83 as they will advance as the top seed into the elimination bracket in the pursuit of yet another gold medal. And, I mean, as we've said with pretty much every single game, it's the usual suspects, Embiid, James, Tatum, all getting double figures as starters, Durant, Davis, Edwards all getting double figures off the bench, and Anthony Edwards going crazy on Saturday, 26 points, 3 rebounds, and 3 assists. As for a guy as young as he is, when we talk about the future of what Olympics men's basketball is going to be, like, he could be that true face once you move on from the guys like Durant and LeBron and Steph and all these kind of guys.
I'm telling you, man, Anthony Edwards is that guy is going to be special. I know we saw a few glimpses of it when he was at Georgia and he came to play at South Carolina for road trips, but seeing it on full display this past season with the Timberwolves playoff run and stuff, and just how important he was to that team and what they did, and now it's translating over to the Olympics. I know he's not starting, but the fact he's coming off the bench and playing 17 minutes and scoring 26 points, it really is unbelievable, and it's it really is a different guy every night in these games that goes out there and makes a tremendous impact. Like it was KD in one of those early games, and now it's Anthony Edwards, and it's always been LeBron and guys like that. So it's good to see that this team, how deep they are, how many guys are making an impact, and like you said, I mean, it really is a dream team type of caliber, squad they got, and it really is theirs for the taking with winning a gold medal.
And now they move on to, again, the elimination bracket, which is in pursuit of the gold medal, as they will take on Brazil coming up on Wednesday, I believe. Here is Brian Windhorst, cut number 15 here, Dave. This is Brian Windhorst of ESPN, detailing why Brazil might actually present a little bit of a challenge to the U.S.
Between their pre-Olympic tour and their pool play games here in France, Team USA has played and beaten 5 of the 7 other teams that joined them in the Olympic quarterfinals. But one of them is not Brazil, who's their opponent on Tuesday night. The Brazilians play a very physical brand of basketball, particularly excelling in offensive rebounding. This has been an area that has been concerning for Team USA so far. They've allowed 16 more offensive rebounds than they've grabbed themselves. Also, Brazil has been red hot shooting the 3, hitting 45% of their shots so far. Making three-pointers and getting extra possessions with offensive rebounding is the recipe for an upset, which is why Steve Kerr has been warning his team about Brazil's success heading into Tuesday's game. As for the Americans, Drew Holiday is expected to return from a sprained ankle that kept him out against Puerto Rico, but Steve Kerr intends to use his full roster. That includes using Kevin Durant off the bench, which has been very successful to this point in the Olympics.
And again, the correction there, they're going to be playing tomorrow night. Women play on Wednesday night, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But as you mentioned, Brazil, a little bit more of a physical team. They do have Bruno Caboclo, who is a former NBA player himself, played for a couple different teams over the course of 7 years, scored 33 points in their victory over Japan, 102-84. So this is a team that does have the ability, and again, they've also made it to the quarterfinals as well. That does have the ability to push the U.S. a little bit more than some of these other teams have, as the U.S. is routinely pulled away in the second half of these games. So it'll be interesting to see if Brazil can truly make a threat towards U.S.'s run for a gold medal again.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. That's the thing. But again, the thing with the recency bias here, it's, USA has really been, dominating, right? They've played better and better as the games have gone on. And we saw an exhibition play. It's not as if they were, behind the eight ball, really. They still won their games, but it's like, they played really tightly against like South Sudan, for instance, who they beat by 1 point, and then they go out there, a few days ago last week and, kill them. So I think they're starting to pick it up now where the games actually count. And look, USA basketball, the tradition is, winning gold medals and stuff. And there's been a little bit of a decline over the years, not tremendous because they're still, getting, qualifying and stuff. But it's like, the expectation is to win every 4 years, and I think this is the squad to go out there and do it.
Well, and now you have more NBA guys spread out throughout the entire world, so it's not this advantage that U.S. has like it once did. So it certainly is bringing some of these other teams up to where the U.S. is, but again, still looking good in pursuit of that gold medal. Just like the women are, as they once again dominated another opponent in Germany over the weekend, 87-68. On Sunday, they'll play again, starting their quarterfinals coming up on a Wednesday. Here's Brian Windhorst, cut number 16 once again, this time talking about the USA and their physical dominant brand of defense.
The Team USA women are loaded with offensive talent, but so far it's been their defense that's been their trademark here at the Olympics. Coach Cheryl Reeve has gotten them to dedicate themselves to playing high-energy, high-pressure defense at that end of the court, and it's made all the difference. This was particularly on display against Germany in their final pool play game on Sunday, when they forced the Germans into 23 turnovers. Whether it was Kelsey Plum, Jackie Young, or Asia Wilson, they were all over Germany's offense, completely disrupting it. It's really enabled them to unlock their fast break opportunities, which has made them very hard to stop. Their offense hasn't been clicking on all cylinders, particularly their three-point shooting, but it hasn't slowed them down because they've been holding opponents to just 40% shooting. And that defense has given them momentum as they enter the quarterfinals on Wednesday, where they will begin their chase for their 8th consecutive gold medal.
And it's kind of funny. It's almost like watching a South Carolina women's basketball game where you're just playing this physical, hard-nosed defense, forcing turnovers and stuff like that. And again, it's working very well for the U.S. women so far.
Yeah, they've got a really stacked team, just like the men's side. And look, the big name that we, South Carolina people all talk about is Asia Wilson. She had 14 points against Germany in 24 minutes, 6 from 11 on the floor. And, she's been starting, killing it as usual. Brianna Stewart, same deal. But the big name off the bench, Jackie Young. 19 points on 7 of 13 shooting, 5 of 8 from deep. That was really, really solid to see. And look, it's the same deal where we talk about it can be anyone's night. And I think the amount of depth both these teams have is really remarkable. And again, like we just said, I think it is the United States' gold medal to lose here, but we'll have to see. It's you never know what can happen. But the story with the Germany game, the second and third quarter, you outscore them 25-10 in the second period, and then 28-17 in the third, and that really put it out of reach. So it's good to see USA basketball in general having a good run here in the Olympics.
It absolutely is. And that game with the women coming up on Wednesday, that'll be against Nigeria at 3:30 Eastern time. And I'm looking for the start time for the men's game, as they'll be playing on a Tuesday. Should be a little bit earlier in the day. Okay, this is also showing 3:30 as well. So a couple mid-afternoon games there in terms of watching the men and women as they continue to pursue gold medals out there at the Olympics in Paris. Speaking of things international, we had a pretty cool event happening at Williams-Brice Stadium this past Saturday with the rivals in red of Liverpool and Manchester United. We'll talk about that a little bit and what other cool events might we want to have at Williams-Brice Stadium in the future. That's coming up. It is The Extra Point. He's Jack Veltri from Gamecock Central. I'm Tyler Head on your Monday on The Game.
That's Elliott, that's nice. Here's Bradley, now Salah, onto Bradley, lovely play from Liverpool. Onana saves it, but it's in this time, and it's Kostas Tsimikas who taps home to round off another very classy Liverpool move.
Welcome back in. Extra Point, Tyler Head, Jack Veltri from Gamecock Central, along with you on this Monday. That was the call over the weekend at Williams-Brice Stadium as Liverpool defeats Manchester United 3-0 is the proper soccer terminology there in the Rivals in Red friendly match that took place on Saturday night here in Columbia. And, you know, I heard a lot of people that went to it. I saw a lot of videos and some of the pictures and stuff. Looked like just an awesome atmosphere. The weather ended up being pretty nice, maybe a little too hot for some of the people coming over from Europe. But regardless, I don't think you could have asked for a better night, and it truly, I think, lived up to what people were expecting out of this.
Yeah, man, it looked absolutely crazy. I mean, I was not, I didn't get a chance to go to the game or anything, but, I was out and about in Columbia and stuff, and, just seeing so much red and stuff, not it's typical Garnet, but it's like It felt like a football Saturday in Columbia because of how many people were coming around town. I mean, you want to go to any restaurant in Columbia, I was out at the Vista. I mean, it's like it's packed. And then, obviously, this is something that caught my eye. I'm, at Hickory Tavern on Saturday, and across the way there's the Hilton Hotel right there, and you got thousands of fans, and it's like the team. I guess the teams were staying there or something. So you have them waiting out there and stuff. It's just the excitement for this game definitely lived up to the hype, I think, and the execution was probably one of the biggest things. Jay Phillips and I were talking about this on Friday afternoon. That was probably one of the biggest things that we were I guess skeptical about was how is the city of Columbia and South Carolina going to manage this thing? Are they going to have enough, police force out there directing traffic? And, the execution needs to be, crisp, perfect, because you only get so many opportunities like this maybe once in your life. If you do this right and show off Columbia on one of the biggest stages on ESPN for millions of people to see, this may lead to more events coming back. I mean, this is the first big event outside of football, at least to my memory, since when Jay-Z and Beyonce were here. So it's been a while, and the execution seemed to be really well done. So bravo to the city of Columbia for a job well done.
And I know there's a lot of people talking about the traffic issues after the game and stuff like that. When you have as many people coming in that are just not familiar with the area. Because, again, when we go to football games, a vast majority of us have been there before. We kind of know what to do. You know where to go. You know which traffic goes where and where you're trying to head. So when you have tens of thousands of people that just don't know the area and trying to navigate the unique traffic situation, I imagine that probably caused, a lot of delays. So I don't think that's anything too much of a deterrent from what overall happened because, again, it seemed like everybody had a really, really good time. And like you said, hopefully this kind of can lead to more huge events. I don't know what is left to check for off at Williams-Brice Stadium that's feasible. Like I said, big concerts have been here. The Pope came here one time. They've had presidential events there before, like a lot of big stuff. But it was really cool to see something that I think a lot of people view as maybe more outside the box, like an international soccer game with two Premier League teams like that.
I just think more consistently speaking is probably the next phase for using Williams-Brice because again, it's used for 12 Saturdays in fall, but outside of that, it's like it really hasn't served much of a big purpose. But I think you could definitely get some more bigger concerts now. I think I think if they ever do these friendlies again, if it's a year by year thing, I'm not sure how it works, but if they do it again in the future, South Carolina definitely is an option. And, at first when you see the three sites for this game and it's like, you got LA, Philly, and little old Columbia, South Carolina. It's like, what? Like, this makes zero sense. But now it's like you see the photos and the turnout was really good. And look, I know people are going to complain about the traffic and all that. That's a given, though. When I was reading a story on one of the local sites here, it's like 50% of the tickets sold were from, people outside of South Carolina and stuff. It's like, that's a given when you have people who don't understand how the flow of traffic works here and stuff, especially with foreigners and stuff.
So we're used to driving the other side of the road.
Exactly. It's so different. So, that and traffic just comes with these events and stuff. So, but again, other than that, it really does seem like South Carolina has done a really good job putting on this event, and I would love to see more like this going forward.
And I saw, I think somebody was writing about this over the weekend, that apparently when they were trying to decide on host for this event, they decided to bring these people to South Carolina Kentucky game where Darude was in attendance, the atmosphere was crazy, the lights and all that kind of stuff. That was a good strategy. They knew what they were doing because Williams-Brice Stadium is obviously good anyway, but it was at another level that night last year. So if that was what truly won them over, that was pretty smart strategy.
Oh, totally. That they're playing chess, not checkers, and again, bravo. Give a big hat tip for that one because USC really has put on a good show here.
Absolutely, and again, it's a great venue. Again, tons of seats and all that kind of stuff. I would like to see, like you said, more consistent things happening throughout the year because again, you only get a handful of games in the fall, and the summer, and the springtime for the most part wide open. So hopefully more things will be coming to Williams-Brice Stadium as time rolls along, especially if you can get that land development down there by the stadium here in these next handful of years. That'll do it for hour number 1 of the Extra Point. Coming up in hour number 2, we'll dive back into the camp conversation. Let's hear a little bit about what Shane Beamer had to say about freshmen on Thursday afternoon. That's coming up next on the halftime show here in the game. Extra Point here on the game. Hour number 2, welcome back in. Extra Point. Tyler Head, Jack Veltri from Gamecock Central along with you on your Monday morning, jumping back into the conversation about South Carolina football as we are but 26 days away from kicking things off at Williams-Brice Stadium between the Gamecocks and the Monarchs of Old Dominion. But in that time, we have a lot to figure out about what exactly this team is going to be. It's going to be very much a lot of new faces in new places. It's going to be one of those games where I feel like this happens a lot now just in general with the transfer portal, but will be especially, evident with South Carolina this year where you got to watch the first game with like the media guide in your hand or at least a rundown of the roster numerically because you're going to be on, okay, who's that guy? Well, who's that number? All right, okay, let me remember that. You got to write that down. Like, it takes a game or two to really get acclimated to who is who on a team like this.
Yeah, man, it definitely took me an adjustment period on Thursday, Friday, Saturday with media day and then the 2 practices. Like, okay, like I know these guys, but I need to figure out who's who with everything else. And it's like you also have 2 numbers for most positions, so it's like it becomes tougher with that. But yeah, I mean, by week 1, hopefully, we'll have the depth chart by then, see who's starting and whatnot. So it should be easier to narrow it down from there. But yeah, they're gonna have a lot of potential guys playing on this roster, and it's a lot of competitions at every position.
And that's what gives you a lot of hope that the upside potential of this team is very, very high, because if you just took, 95, 96% of what you had last year and put it back out on the field this year, yeah, there's going to be the opportunity for development and improvement, but you don't have a lot of confidence that they're going to take big leaps forward necessarily. And I look at a team like Clemson last year that, again, had an underwhelming season. A lot of people are projecting them to be in the mix for the college football playoff and all that kind of stuff, but I'm not sold on that because that team didn't change a whole lot from last year. And unless the development is just that much better, I don't know how much better Clemson can be this year.
And we've talked about before with Dabo not wanting to really utilize the transfer portal. At some point, I do feel like it's going to come back to bite him. And it's going to be like, okay, once you have like a 6-win season or anything less, if you keep regressing, you got to change eventually, right? But if he keeps getting 8-4, 9-3 type of results like he has been, I don't think he's going to change. But the expectation with Clemson, it should be more national championships and stuff. The fact that they only have 2 during that time is it's impressive, but it's like it could have been a lot more. Like the year after they demolish Alabama, it's like they haven't won one since. That's kind of crazy to think about.
And this is especially true in professional sports, but also in college as well. You have your window, right? When everything is just the perfect mix where you can win Super Bowls, World Series, national championships, all that kind of stuff. And, when Clemson had that window with Sean Watson and Trevor Lawrence, they capitalized and got 2 national championships. But after losing after losing in the semifinals against Ohio State in 20, that would be the last time they got in, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, because 2019, they lost to LSU in the title game, right?
Yes. Everybody lost to LSU that year. But,
that's true. That's true.
They made it back the following year, lost to Ohio State in the semifinal round.
That's it since then.
That was the last time. So, again, they've still been towards the top, and they've been in big bowl games. But this past year was definitely a step backwards. And again, you just do kind of wonder, okay, was that a 1-year anomaly? Are they going to get back to the norm this year, or are they starting to trend back in the other direction? And the fact they're not willing to embrace something like the transfer portal finally catching up to them.
Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be tough this year. You got you go to Florida State. I'm pretty sure you got Carolina coming to you. NC State's on the schedule. But again, it's like I just don't know what to expect with this team. I think Klubnik is a fine quarterback. I don't think he's amazing.
Sure.
But you're losing some guys on that offense, and it's gonna be tough. But again, the thing with Clemson is I don't feel like you can necessarily count them out because they do tend to surprise you in some ways,
right.
And that's the one thing. I always expect a Dabo Sweeney-led team in this era of college football to at least be in the mix for maybe the college football playoff, but definitely bowl game every year, for sure.
Well, for a team like Clemson that, again, doesn't dabble in the transfer portal too much, they're going to be relying on some true freshmen coming in to make a big impact. I know they got a couple receivers in TJ Moore and Bryant Wesco that they're excited to see what kind of impact they're going to be able to make right off the jump for the Tigers in the upstate. Similarly, South Carolina has a lot of freshmen that do have the ability to maybe find their way onto the field at some point this year, if not in a starting role, in a rotational type of role. Let's go back to Thursday when Coach Beamer was speaking to the media a little bit about freshmen and who might be able to make a pretty big impact this year.
Yeah, another great point. We talked about that a lot as a staff this morning. Just some of the injuries that we've had early in the year, and you're right about last year, and then really the year before with Nicky Mamori when we had a safety that came out of the game, and then Nick comes in. It's just like right away. I think just the moment's not too big for them. You know, they don't have a lot of issues, and coaches have said it before, kind of how you do anything is how you do everything, and we just watched a video on Eric Spoelstra, the head coach of the Miami Heat, talking about that with LeBron James when LeBron played for the Heat, and how he did everything, how his locker looked to how he handled his nutrition. He just did everything right. I think I look for that. And when you talk about the guys that have come in and had to play for us early as a true freshman, whether it be Jalen Kilgore was at the second play of the game last year against North Carolina, Nick early, both those guys specifically are guys that they're never on any list. I mean, they just do everything right on the field and off the field, and I think that's a sign, certainly, for one. They just kind of handle their business, and you realize that they're not a guy that's late for this or missing this or not going to class. They just handle their business, and they're a pro, and that to me equates on the field. But then the other thing that I would say also is the way college football is nowadays. With all these guys, most of them being here in January, you've seen that, and you've had a chance to develop them even more leading into the first game as well. I mean, the days of, I don't want to be like back when I played, but not that long ago, freshmen didn't even show up till July. And then you practiced for 3 weeks, or you lifted weights for about 3 weeks, and you went and practiced, and that was it. And then before that, freshmen didn't even show up until August, and they just went straight to practice, and then they played as well. So I think it's one of those, you get more time with them to help develop them for the first game. But then certainly there's character signs that are very evident to me that say, okay, this guy's going to have a chance to help you as a freshman.
And again, when you look back the past couple of years, there was certainly plenty of reason and excitement around guys like Imamori, around guys like Kilgore, but they got thrust into opportunities because of injuries. Literally both of those guys right in the first game, only a couple plays, into the game. We hope that's not the case this year. We hope everybody stays healthy. Again, knock on wood, for the most part, where you're not forcing a freshman into the starting role because of that. But there's plenty of guys that do have that upside potential to maybe find their way onto the field. Maybe not in a starting role, but at least in some kind of contributing role as the season rolls along, and that's going to start right at the jump with a guy like Dylan Stewart, who, again, everything that we've heard about him this offseason, he's lived up to the billing. Now he's got to be able to go out there and prove it on the field.
Yeah, the jump he's made in the weight room is insane. It's so crazy seeing these before and after pictures, and it's like, you look at it, I mean, you would have thought a guy like Dylan Stewart would have already been pretty ripped coming into, the beginning of the year and stuff when he first got here. But it's like, when you look at the after picture, it's like, dang, like this dude was like, he's probably good for his size in high school, but it's like he was not ripped at all, and now he's just like,
right.
It's night and day, the differences, and I definitely think he's one of those guys like that you're gonna want to keep your eye on during games and stuff. And I totally expect him to make a big impact this year on that defense. Absolutely,
and for a guy like him, as is the case with most of these guys coming in as freshmen, they never really had a set regime or a regimen when they were, in high school when it came to nutrition and consistent lifting and stuff like that. High schools do the best they can, but they don't have a dedicated staff necessarily to weight training and nutrition like you do at a place like South Carolina or any high-level institution across the country. So getting those guys in here, working with the nutritionists, working with the strength staff, and putting together those plans and stuff ends up giving you those kind of results, which, again, makes a guy like Dylan Stewart that was already very scary even scarier this year, and especially with the edge room that just needs to take a big leap in performance from a season ago. Potentially Dylan Stewart could be one of those guys to be a part of that.
Yeah, and it all goes back to Luke Day, the strength and conditioning coach at South Carolina, putting these guys in absolutely tremendous shape. It is just, it's crazy to see how big these guys were looking when we saw them at media day. But you do talk about the edge room and the defensive line in general. I do think this is the year for them to really, go out there and show the country kind of what they can do up front. And I definitely expect a lot more push in that area. I was talking to some of the coaches and players on that defensive line, and they were kind of talking about, the goal for this year is to get more sacks. And they were able to get some last year, but it wasn't like they were able to get consistent pressure on the quarterback. And that's something they kind of are emphasizing more this year. And, I just think they can go out there and do it. Who's going to be making impacts, in my opinion? I think you could see a guy like Brian Thomas Jr. at the edge position really take a big step forward from what he did last year. He had some great games down the stretch on that defensive front. And then obviously like Dylan Stewart, Tonka Hemingway, Boogie, guys like that, Nick Barrett, TJ Sanders, a lot of guys like that are going to go out there and make an impact. I think we could definitely see it this year.
And there's several other freshmen as well that we've heard a lot of good things about through spring or summer, and especially now as we enter into fall camp, that are going to be interesting to keep an eye on. One of those guys being Michael Smith, somebody that is entering a tight end room that I think is pretty solid with guys like Josh Simon and Brady Hunt coming over from Ball State. But if Michael Smith ends up being what people have said him to be up to this point, he might be able to factor into maybe finding his way on the field as a freshman as well.
Yeah, I wonder how South Carolina is going to really run tight ends this year. I definitely could see some situations where you have a 2 tight end set and you got them both on the side there. I definitely think Josh Simon's going to be getting the bulk of the reps of that position. Brady Hunt, obviously, probably your number 2. But if for some reason one of them goes down or whatever the case might be, Michael Smith feels like a very viable option at that position. And, look, his high school tape really speaks for itself. Great player, great tight end. He's the future at this position after both these guys in front of him leave. But, again, I think South Carolina feels very good about what they've got at tight end, and I would expect to see those guys definitely utilized a lot more this year. We kind of got a glimpse of it last year with Knox and Simon, but this year for sure we're going to see a little more incorporation.
And then you have freshmen that are just in very, very loaded rooms like Mazio Bennett, DeBron Gatling in the wide receiver room, Wendell Gregory and J.R. Johnson in the linebacker room, Josiah Thompson, Cam Pringle, as well as Blake Franks in the offensive line room as well. And ideally, again, you don't think these guys are probably going to be in starting roles, but if they perform well enough over the course of fall camp, or maybe even a little bit of action they get to start the season, they could work their way into being a little bit more consistent contributors at these rooms where outside the offensive line, you are going to see rotations.
Yeah, I don't know who's really going to play right away amongst those freshmen. I feel like it's definitely going to be tough for some of those receivers with so many guys in front of Mazio Bennett and DeBron Gatling. But it wouldn't surprise me if we saw those guys making an impact. Now, I will say, and just take this with a grain of salt because it was just from walking out of practice and stuff. But the other day walking out of practice, we did get to see a quick glimpse of, I guess, what looked like the starting 11 on offense. And again, it's early in camp and stuff, but we did see I did see Josiah Thompson, number 74, out there on the O-line with the other big guys and stuff. And I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me if a guy like him is starting at left tackle this year. I know that was Tree Babalade's spot last year, but he's a guy that we've talked about before, can definitely work in at the right side of the offensive line this year. And, that would open a gate for, Josiah to go in there. And he's definitely the guy amongst the freshmen that I definitely feel like can start week 1 and hold that position. But again, we're going to have to see what happens.
Absolutely. Reminder, coming up at the end of the month, Summer Golf Classic at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia. That'll be on Friday, August 23rd. Going to be raffling off some season football tickets as well as crowning our ultimate Gamecock season ticket winner overall. To be a part of it, if you want to sign up for a foursome, call Charwood at 803-755-2000. Again, 803-755-2000 to be a part of our Summer Golf Classic at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia. Take a look at the greater world of college football. Michigan potentially getting set to be hit with some sanctions by the NCAA. That's coming up next here on The Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Veltri on the game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head, Jack Veltri from Gamecock Central along with you on your Monday here on the game, taking a look around the world of college football as we fast approach the start of the 2024 season. And if you have not, in case you've forgotten, there was a lot going on with the University of Michigan last year in pursuit of their national championship. As in late October, the Connor Stallions story hit the fan, and everything was off and running from there. And now, as we approach the start of the season, the NCAA getting set to potentially levy some penalties against the university as a notice of allegations was leaked to a couple guys at ESPN, including Pete Thamel and Brad Murphy, that reported on it over the weekend. And there's some pretty heavy stuff in here that makes you think that Michigan might be getting the hammer dropped on them here soon by the NCAA.
It's the gift that keeps on giving, right? It's the story that never ends. It's just crazy to think about, right? Because, it's Michigan football. They're one of the biggest brand entities in this entire sport. And to see this has been going on for the past year. We've been talking about this whole saga.
Yep.
And, hopefully it reaches a conclusion at some point. But again, I think the consensus is going to be that there is going to be some sort of penalty dropped on Michigan. Now, how severe will it be? I'm not sure. How does it play into? I feel like the NCAA shouldn't really hold back when it comes to this, because this is a huge scandal we're talking about.
Sure.
We've seen it before in other sports and stuff, but this is massive, and it's you really got to set the tone for you don't want other teams going out there and doing this. Mm-hmm. So why not go out here and really lay down the hammer a little bit? Maybe a bowl ban for a few years. I'm not sure, but something is definitely going to happen, and I'm fascinated to see what it will be.
So per the investigation that was led by the NCAA, they uncovered 58 separate games that were scouted illegally by Connor Stallions and whoever were his accomplices. And all this, 7 different coaches found to be in violation of NCAA rules. And new head coach Sherrone Moore, who moved up into that position after Jim Harbaugh left at the end of last season, was found to have deleted 52 text messages between himself and Connor Stallions after the story initially broke back in October of last year. And this gets interesting from the standpoint of Sherrone Moore, who again is now the head coach, could be facing suspensions or a show cause himself once the official allegations come out.
I don't think you could have gotten off to a worse start to your tenure as head coach at the University of Michigan like Sherrone Moore has. Obviously, last year, he got the fill in for the Penn State game. We all saw him crying on national television and stuff, and it's just, and he's guilty in all this. It's crazy to think about. I don't know what this season's going to look like for Michigan. I'm not expecting them to get back to the national championship and win again. I don't think that's going to happen just because they had such a great team last year.
Right.
And this is a tough schedule. They got, the Big Ten's different this year. You obviously are playing Texas at home week 2, but then you got, USC, Washington on the road. You got Oregon this year, and then you go to Ohio State. That's 4 or 5 potential losses right there. And I just think with the carousel and the whole, looming factor of this entire thing weighing on the program, I just feel like it's going to really impact how these guys respond and play. But they also could use it to their advantage like they did last year when Harbaugh got suspended, and it's the guys are, what was the saying they had? I
don't even remember.
But it was something like, us against the world type mentality.
Us against the world, and they kind of treated Jim Harbaugh like he died or something like that. It was weird, but that was their rallying cry.
Yeah, but it worked.
And it did work. But the difference between that, and again, Jim Harbaugh was suspended for half of the regular season games last year, which is hilarious to think about in hindsight, but he still got to be a part of practice. He still got to prepare the team. The only thing he could not do was stand on the sidelines on Saturday. So there is not that much of a penalty when it comes to a coach like that, still going to implement his game plan, just not being allowed to be on the sidelines. So now this is Sherrone Moore. Again, let's assume he is going to be suspended for a couple games. What's that going to look like for him? Because, he's still going to be a part of practice. We don't know what a Sherrone Moore fully coached team is going to look like just yet. And then in addition to that, who's going to be running the game for him when he's at the hotel or back at the facility or whatever it is because he can't be on the sidelines. This is setting Michigan up for what could potentially be a rough season after losing a lot of talent for that national championship a year ago.
Yeah, I just think, I don't think it can get as bad as it did Like when we talk Michigan football, for the most part, it's been very good, especially recently. But you go back to like the early 2010s, and it's like this team straight up stunk. Like they were not good. You had Brady Hoke was your head coach and stuff, and those were some rough years. So
right.
I don't expect it to get back to that level of bad. I do think Michigan's going to be fine this year. They'll make a bowl game, I think, assuming I would imagine they're allowed to. But this could have a long-term impact, especially if they get bowl bans and stuff and they lose scholarships. That's going to impact guys and future recruits wanting to come here. It's like, okay, if I'm picking between Ohio State and Michigan for what school I want to go to, I'm going to go to Ohio State 9 times out of 10 because they don't have a dark cloud weighing over them. Like it's eventually going to strike lightning eventually.
The funniest part of the notice of allegations was that they did confirm that Connor Stallions was on the sidelines at the Central Michigan State game in week number 1 last year, wearing that really bad disguise, recording Michigan State signs for the game Michigan will play against them later in the season. The Connor Stallions story itself was already kind of ridiculous enough, but then when we saw this photo or video of a guy that looked like him on the Central Michigan sideline, I think it took it to another level. So to hear that was actually true is really, really funny.
Oh man, it's so it's so bizarre, but so crazy at the same time. And an important thing with this whole Connor Stallion situation is that let's not forget he's going to be sharing his side of the story on Netflix with that Untold documentary Sign Stealer, which is coming out August 27th. So he's going to be breaking his silence on this whole saga and really get to tell what really happened, and hopefully it's as good as advertised. And I don't know when. We don't know when the NCAA is going to come to a decision on this whole thing, but I got to imagine it's relatively soon. And at the same time, maybe they're waiting to see this whole thing from his perspective. I'm sure they've talked to him, but it's just like it could go really, really bad.
And that's why the timing of this is interesting, because the Untold documentary is set to come out on August 27th. I think the NCAA is wanting to get ahead of this because they can try and refute whatever ends up being said by Connor Stallions, whoever is going to be featured in this thing a little bit later on in this month. So they want to go ahead and get ahead of that, get the allegations out there, tell Michigan whatever their penalties are. I don't know if they're going to be taking away the national championship or whatever it may be, but they're definitely trying to get ahead of that documentary in a couple weeks.
I wonder if they would vacate the national title.
Here's the funny thing to me, because the NCAA does not preside over the college football playoff national championship.
No.
That is not their national title to revoke. And in the playoff era, we've not seen it happen. It's happened in the BCS era before, but I don't know how it works where that's possible, where the NCAA, and I get that the presiding body over all of college sports, but still, they don't host that championship.
No, and I imagine, I don't know, maybe the College Football Playoff Committee would meet on an issue such as this and talk about, I don't know, because it's never happened before, and it's so different from the BCS era where the NCAA had a major role in it, but this is a separate entity, so I don't know how that would work, but I definitely think, I'm not sure what the penalty is going to be, but I'm guessing it's going to be postseason ban for a few years, reduced scholarships and visits and stuff. And then, you could also see maybe just, some wins vacated. I don't know. I mean, look, this whole thing goes back, a while. I mean, we're talking about, before the whole Connor Stallions thing, Michigan was 49-26, and those were the years where Michigan had great teams, but every year they seemed to lose to Ohio State, and then they couldn't get into the playoff and get the job done, and it was tough. But in the last 43 games, it's 40-3, and they're unbelievable, unstoppable, and they beat Ohio State every year. So it's like it definitely has an impact.
Those kind of things don't just happen. There's a rhyme or reason to it, and it may be the Connor Stallions effect there for Michigan. And again, this is just a draft of the notice of allegations. The final ones have not come out yet, but they will be coming out very, very soon, and we'll see what kind of penalties Michigan's going to have to pay for what happened with Connor Stallions. We'll keep on the topic of the college football playoff. Some interesting statistics in terms of how many teams have a shot at making it in your number one of the 12-team format. What does that mean for our definition of acceptability going forward in college football? With that coming up next, it is the Extra Point, Tyler Head, Jack Veltri on your Monday on the Game. Welcome back in. Extra Point. Tyler Head, Jack Veltri from Gamecock Central, along with you on your Monday. Appreciate everybody tuned in to us on the Game TV, sponsored by our friends at Shepherd's Glass, powered by Integrated Media. You can also check us out on the 107.5 Game app, download it on the iTunes Store, the Google Play Store, and listen to us wherever you go. Last week, Heather Dinich of ESPN compiled a list of the 30 teams that have an opportunity to reach the college football playoff. This based on ESPN's FPI percentage to make the playoff predictor, where 30 teams have a 10% or better shot to make it into the college football playoff. And this is a topic that I've visited a couple of different times over the course of this offseason, because really the better part of 20 some odd years, going back to the original BCS, even into the more recent 4-team college football playoff, we've never really been able to say more often than not that more than like 10-ish teams have a good shot at the national championship going into a season. Now, there have been teams that have come out that's nowhere and surprised us. LSU a couple seasons ago, Auburn back in 2010 that nobody was really factoring in. But for the most part, it's status quo. It's been Georgia as of late, Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, the usual suspects kind of towards the top that end up winning the national championship more often than not. But this is a completely wide open thing. And not only to just win the national championship, to get into the playoffs opens the door to so many more teams than it used to.
And that's why I think we're seeing so many more teams have a better chance this year, because it is a 12-team playoff and you get more teams in. Again, I think the threshold number, the target number of wins you probably need at the minimum to have a chance at this and probably get in is probably 9-3, and that probably goes without a conference championship unless you're lucky in that case. But 9-3 probably seems like the goal, and it's gonna be tough. I mean, you got the four big conferences, and then the group of 5, and then after that it's really like anyone's game.
And it kind of begs a question in my mind of where does the line of acceptability move to? Because for the longest time, again, go back to the BCS era, if you made the national championship, you had to be one of the best 2 teams in the country based on the computer polls. And if you made the national championship, whether you won it or not, huge accomplishment. Go to 14 playoff. Again, still got to be one of the best 4 teams based on what the committee said. And if you made it, there was no argument with that. And that was a huge accomplishment. Now making a 12-team playoff is not as big of an accomplishment. It's still great, and you're still one of the 12 out of 134 teams to do it, but there are going to be certain programs, Georgia's, Ohio State's, Alabama's, where just making it isn't going to be acceptable. You have to go deep. You have to win it every now and then as well. And you're not going to win the national championship every single year. That's going to be even harder now with 12-team playoff, but there are certain programs where, much like in the NFL, if you miss the playoffs a certain handful of years, guess what? You're going to get fired. We're going to go find another head coach. If Alabama misses the playoffs 3 years in a row with Kalen DeBoer, guess what? They're going to be looking for another head coach by 2027. So it's interesting to see how that line's going to move for programs. And there's going to be other programs out there that just making it's going to be fine. Hey, we made the playoffs. That's cool. That's great. Yeah, we lost in the first round. Or, hey, maybe we won the game and got bounced in the second round. That's going to be perfectly fine for them. But that's not the line. That's not the same for everyone.
No, and the way you brought the NFL standpoint, that's kind of the way I look at it. It's like, okay, if you make the playoffs, it's like, oh, yay, we made it. But I think that's kind of how it is for smaller teams. But it's like, from the NFL standpoint, it's like, do you make the playoffs and you get bounced first round? If you're like the Bills and you get bounced first round, it's like, disappointing season, at least to me. But
right.
I think for these bigger programs, it's gonna be tough to win the title year in and year out, because it's not like years before where coming into the season like it's Bama, Georgia, and then everyone else. This year, I mean, I wonder how it's gonna play out, because you got the first round at your home stadiums. It could really be a crapshoot of who wins this thing. It could be like the MLB, where it's just like they're the hottest team that comes into this thing, wins the title. I'm not sure how it's going to go, but it's really going to be a grind, because it's a really long stretch, almost a month at this point.
Sure.
And whoever comes out of there winning this thing, it's really going to be hard, and it's probably going to be a team that we're not even expecting. I would say it's like a 50-50 shot. It's one of these teams that aren't as talked about as like the Bamas, Georgias, Texas, Michigans of the world. Well,
and you're right, and getting hot at the right time certainly provides a benefit there. And I think back to like Auburn in 2017, where they beat Georgia and Alabama, both number one teams at the time, in 2 weeks or 3 weeks apart from one another, and nearly made the 14 playoff as a 2-loss team. They were riding a wave of momentum, and had they beaten Georgia in the SEC championship game, who knows what happens in a 12-team playoff there. I know they lost the Peach Bowl to Central Florida, but I don't think they were very interested in that game, which, that dampens the national championship Central Florida has, but that's besides the point here. But you truly never know, because, if you lose a couple games early on in the season now, it's not the end of the world like it used to be, because, again, even in the 4-team format, you lost more than 2 games, you're done. Like, there's no coming back from that. You can only have one game that's a margin for error, and that's it. Now it opens it up. Like you said, 9-3 is at least the minimum, depending on who you play and your schedule and all that kind of stuff, that can get you in. So yeah, being hot at the right time, I think, is going to matter a lot. And for programs, I think about a program like Penn State, right? Like, it has always been kind of around the playoff. They're always a 9-10 win team, but never been good enough to get in, even when they won the Big Ten championship back in 2016. Like, where's their line? Does just making it become good enough for them, or are they like, okay, well, if we don't go into the second or third round after 5 years, are we looking for a new head coach? Like, I don't know which way a program like that goes.
It's tough to say, because they've never been to the playoff, and so what changes? Because, like, obviously the expectation year after year is to get to the playoff. What happens if they get there this year and, like, they get bounced, like, first round? I mean, I guess it's a good season because they've never been there before.
Sure,
but I guess at the same time, it's like, the next thing is we got there once. Now it's like, we got to advance. So I think if you're getting there every year but you're not advancing, I think that's kind of where you draw the line in the sand. But another interesting thing with this whole format is that, now this is going to make bowl games more enticing to watch. It's like, in years past, it's like, if you don't make the playoff, most of your guys are going to sit out. And I've always hated that. I get why they do it, because injuries happen. But it's like, come on, like, these huge bowl games that everyone loves watching. I love getting up and watching these, these games on, New Year's Day or whatever. And it's like, guys are sitting out. It takes the fun out of it. And, now it's like, these guys are going to have to play.
They are, and all what we now know as New Year's Six bowls will be a factor in the playoff schedule every single year, whether they be semifinals or quarterfinals. In a weird way, though, and I'm with you, I love bowl games. I've always loved bowl games. I don't complain about there being too many. I watch as many as I possibly can. But if we were, like, making the playoff from scratch, bowl games have nothing to do with this. We would be playing at the home venue of higher seeds until you get to the national championship game, just like the Super Bowl does and every other form of sports that have postseasons. But because bowl games have always existed and they make a lot of money for the cities and the sponsors and all that kind of stuff, they have to continue to be around, which is why we've kind of circumvented them into this playoff, even though it doesn't make the most sense. And you're also asking fan bases to travel a lot over the course of a month. I don't know how well this plays out long term.
No, I don't know either. If it were up to me, I would have done 8 teams. I just think that's a lot simpler and less travel and stuff, like you said. And it's also going to be weird because it's like, it's during mid-December, these first-round playoff games. And imagine if you're like, Alabama. I'll give a less big example. Let's say it's like U.S., like Southern California or something, and a lot of those kids are back home on break or whatever. Mm-hmm. Are they going to come back and, support? I mean, I'm not sure. If it's a school like South Carolina or Georgia, Bama, whatever the case might be, one of these southeastern schools, I definitely expect fans to return, but I'm not sure what the case is going to be with that. So it's a lot of different things, but with some of the teams on this list, I kind of wanted to get in that for a second before we, switch it over. Looking at it, I mean, are you surprised? Like, I know you've been high on them in the past.
Yeah.
Auburn, number 26 on this list, a 13.5% chance to make the playoff. This is a team that went 6-7 last year. And for reference, they're ahead of Southern Cal, Oklahoma State, Utah, and Texas Tech, who also is a big surprise on this list. I mean, who is it surprising that they have a better chance, and who else on this list kind of surprises you?
I will tell you why I think Auburn is a little bit under the radar and why I'm not surprised they're on this list as we come back and wrap up today's edition of The Extra Point. That's coming up next. He is Jack Veltri from Gamecock Central. I'm Tyler Head on your Monday here on The Game. Welcome back in. Extra Point, Tyler Head, Jack Veltri from Gamecock Central, along with you here on this Monday. Coming up next, it is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. We'll get Wes and Chris's recap of what they saw out at practice over the weekend as we get rolling through the start of fall camp. But continuing on with our conversation about this list that Heather Dinge put together involving the 30 teams with a 10% or better shot to make the college football playoff in the first year of the 12-team format. And you asked a very interesting question about Auburn, who comes in at 13%, which is the lowest odds in the SEC. While I'm not putting them as a factor, I think, to make the college football playoff, I do think they're going to be a lot better than people would expect. I think Hugh Freeze is a really good coach. You can say what you want about him off the field and his antics from when he was at Ole Miss. Guy can coach. Guy beat Nick Saban in back-to-back years in 2014 and 2015 when he was at Ole Miss. We'll see how much better Peyton Thorne can get in year number 2, but he's a guy that has gotten a lot out of maybe not the highest caliber talent in his time at Ole Miss, and I believe he can do the same thing at Auburn. So I don't think, again, they're going to be in the mix for the playoff necessarily, but I do think they can be a very solid team in the SEC this year.
Yeah, like they went 6-7 last year. They really should have beaten Alabama last year.
I know.
Like 4th down and 31 yards ago, that was crazy. But with this Auburn team, it's interesting. I'm not sure what to expect this year. The thing with Auburn is, more times than not, I mean, the last time they beat Bama at Bryant-Denny, which is where they have to go at the end of the year, the season, was 2010 when Cam Newton went in there and pulled off a real stunner in a game that Bama was up by a lot. So it's been a while, and if Auburn can that's always been their Achilles heel, is going to Tuscaloosa and winning that game. I'm not sure if this is the year they're going to do it. The track record's not necessarily there for them to do it. But I think the schedule lends itself well enough to a good start to the year. They got Cal, New Mexico. Your first month of the season is all at home, and then you go to Georgia, Missouri, and Kentucky. So three straight away games with a bye week, with one bye week mixed in. That's gonna determine like what this season really looks like for the Tigers, because it's like if you go 0-3 in that stretch, which they most certainly could. I don't know. I mean, it could be a year where it's like, okay, like they have the potential, but it's like they couldn't get over that Achilles heel. And then once you get after that, it's Vanderbilt, ULM, Texas A&M, and then Bama. So I would say this is definitely, ceiling-wise, a 9-win team. Lower than that, this could be a team that misses a bowl game, but we'll have to see.
And again, depending on which teams you beat out of those 9 that you're talking about there, and which 3 you lose to, you could certainly be in the mix. And I do think Auburn's going to be one of those teams as the years go by to be consistently in the mix for a college football playoff spot with the field being expanded. I just don't quite know if this year is going to be the year to make that jump. Other teams on the list for the SEC that I'm not quite sure about yet: Oklahoma and Texas A&M. I just think there's too many questions about both those teams. Now, I do think Mike Elko is coming into a pretty decent situation at Texas A&M with a lot of players that he recruited there a couple seasons ago as the defensive coordinator. I just don't know if they're quite ready to be in that 8 to 9 win range in year number 1. But if he's the right guy, they could certainly be that in the next handful of years.
A&M, I go back and forth on them. I think they're going to surprise some people this year. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what they're going to end up getting to. But I definitely think like last year was such a disappointment for that program. And obviously Jimbo Fisher got fired and stuff. But it's also like they had so much talent. And a few years ago, they had the number 1 recruiting class in the country.
Which Elko was a big part of making that happen.
So I'm not sure what it's going to look like. You get Wegman back this year. And they got some other guys on that team that could definitely be a factor, but you're also losing some guys. I'm pretty sure you lost Anaya Smith, and Evan Stort's gone too. So we're gonna see what happens. They get Notre Dame right out of the gate, so that would be an early indication of like, okay, if they win that game, which I think they most certainly could, since Zach Kyle Field, it's gonna be buzzing. Mike Elko era is here. I mean, this could be a team that maybe, I think they get to a bowl game this year, but beyond that, I don't know. And then who was the other team you brought up?
Oklahoma.
First year in the SEC. I think Texas is the program that has the success to get going with this whole transition, but Oklahoma might take a little bit of time, and we'll see what happens. But some of the other teams on this list, man, I mean, I think teams that we're not talking about enough from the Big 12. I mean, Utah, for me, I feel like is a team that could definitely go out here and win that conference.
And Big 12's got to be the most wide open conference there is.
That's
because
what we're
you're
saying.
losing the two top dogs in Texas and Oklahoma. It's fair game. In addition to bringing in a Utah, Arizona, two schools that had a great final year in the Pac-12. Like the Big 12 is going to be very interesting to watch this year.
It's going to be fascinating. You got Kansas and Kansas State right behind each other at 15 and 16 on this list. I mean, I don't know. It's very possible that we see. I think we're getting two Big 12 teams in this playoff, and Colorado is not going to be one of them. I don't see it. I'm not buying into the hype until I see them put it together for a full year. But I definitely could see, Utah, I think, is a sleeper. I think one of those Pac-12 teams that made the transition over to the Big 12 is going to get in, I think, as the title winner from that conference. And then outside of that, I think Kansas, man, I like what they got. They're getting, Jalen Daniels back for another year. I think this is their year to get in, and it's going to be fascinating.
I definitely believe in Kansas, which is a weird thing to say given how tumultuous the past 15 years or so have been since they made that was it the Orange Bowl?
Yeah,
back with Eric Mangini back in 08. So it's been slim picking since then, but they might have a good shot at making it this year, and we'll certainly have to see what does end up happening. That'll do it for today's edition of the Extra Point. Coming up next, Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Myself, Wes Mitchell, and Chris Clark. Appreciate your time, Jack. We'll see you later in the week.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on as always.
Absolutely. Coming up next, Gamecock Central Takeover Hour here in the game.